After the toast, Daniel leaned into the microphone, his champagne glass trembling with mock excitement. "You're nothing without my family's money," he said. The entire ballroom fell silent. I was standing beside him in my emerald dress, my hand resting on the thick folder that contained a $500,000 venue contract, and I felt the weight of every eye burning into me. That was the night of our engagement party. 190 guests, chandeliers glowing the kind of ballroom you see in glossy wedding magazines. The waiters were still carrying silver trays of canapes when he delivered that line. I can still hear the click of a glass dropped on the marble floor, still see the awkward smiles frozen across the faces of colleagues and distant relatives. For me, the air turned heavy. Each breath tasted like metal. In that moment, I didn't shout back. I didn't argue or even raise an eyebrow. I simply tightened my grip on the folder. My fingers pressed so hard that the corner of the paper cut into my skin. The sting was oddly grounding, like a reminder that I was still here, still real, even as he tried to reduce me to nothing more than a prop. The party didn't stop. Laughter limped back into the room. Glasses clinked again, though the sound was brittle hollow. I stood among them, invisible in plain sight. On the stage, Daniel beamed as if nothing cruel had been said. People smiled at him, then at me, the way you smile at a porcelain doll whose crack you pretend not to notice. I have lived long enough to know that humiliation rarely arrives alone. It travels with silence, with isolation. The next hour was a performance guests, congratulating music, swelling photos, being snapped under gilded arches. I posed, I nodded, I thanked people for coming. But in each picture I see now, there is a shadow in my eyes, a question pressing against my chest. When did love become spectacle, and when did I agree to play the fool? Daniel's family laughed too loudly. His mother Evelyn brushed a diamond necklace against her collarbone as she whispered to a circle of women, glancing at me with lips curled in disdain. Their bracelets caught the light, their polished nails tapped champagne flutes in rhythm, as if the night belonged only to them. To them, perhaps it did. I remember looking down at the folder again, the embossed stamp of the hotel, the thick contract pages folded neatly inside. My name signed on every line, my savings invested in each decision, my independence woven into the very paper he mocked. In that instant, I realized that silence could be stronger than noise. If he thought he was the only one capable of theater, he had forgotten who was managing the stage. I'll tell you later what happened after that night, why the contracts mattered more than his smug smile, and how a single decision turned every cruel word back on him. For now, I want you to sit with this moment, a room filled with wealth and wine, and a single sentence that stripped me bare. Tell me where you are watching from and make sure you subscribe. We need to talk about families, money, and betrayal. I should have seen it sooner. Looking back, the signs were there. They always are when love starts wearing a mask. Daniel was meticulous about appearances, about orchestrating dinners, where the wine label had to face the camera just right, about making sure his cufflinks glinted under candlelight. But when it came to the marriage itself, the life beyond the show, he left the burden squarely on me. The wedding binder grew thicker by the week. Inside were deposits for catering florists, music the photographer. My signature was everywhere. His was nowhere. I wrote the checks, wired the funds, and coordinated the schedules. I didn't mind at first. I am a project manager by trade, and spreadsheets are second nature to me. I thought I was investing in us, that this was proof of my commitment. Daniel's family saw it differently. Evelyn once called me an outsider with no class while sipping her martini at a tasting. She thought I was out of earshot, but the words carried sharp as crystal. I kept my face smooth, but inside something splintered. Outsider, no class. Those words did not belong to Evelyn alone. Daniel wore them too, in every dismissive shrug, in every reminder that his family was the real backbone of this union. So when the engagement party ended and I went home with swollen feet and that thin cut across my finger from the folder, I did not cry. I opened my laptop, placed the binder beside it, and created a new spreadsheet. Not for planning, for dismantling. The first call was to the hotel, a grand hall with towering ceilings where we had placed a deposit of $15,000. I introduced myself calmly. This is Sophia Hawthorne, regarding the October 12th reservation. I need to terminate our agreement. The woman on the other end was startled but polite. She reminded me the deposit was non-refundable, though 75% might return if the date was rebooked. I signed the cancellation papers without hesitation. One contract gone. The next morning, I called the photographer. $5,000. He promised to return half if another client booked him. I thanked him and moved on. The caterer kept 3,000. The florist 2,500. The quartet 1,000. Each call was a slice, and by Friday the wedding that had loomed like a mountain was no more than rubble at my feet. The total immediate loss was $12,000. A sickening number, yes, but better to bleed once than to be drained slowly by a life built on humiliation. Money can be earned again. Dignity once given away is harder to reclaim. I also thought about the ring. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a diamond that once sat on my grandmother's hand, a piece of history that carried whispers of resilience. I could not allow it to become a bargaining chip in Daniel's theater. I went to the bank and placed it in a safe deposit box. When the vault door closed heavy and final, I felt my spine straighten. The weeks after were strange. I moved through our apartment as though through a museum of a relationship already gone. Her perfume still lingered on jackets, his cologne on ties. Friends asked about the wedding. Planning is on hold, I said. That was easier than telling the truth. But what they didn't know was this: the wedding was not on hold. It was gone. Every page of that binder was stamped canceled. The apartment grew quieter with each passing day, though it was not the sort of silence that comforts, it was the kind that scratches. His things were everywhere, a museum display of promises that had no keeper. The cufflinks laid neatly on the dresser, the custom-tailored suit bag hanging by the closet, the stack of embossed invitations waiting to be mailed. I would brush past them like a stranger walking through someone else's abandoned house. Friends still asked questions, their voices hopeful, sometimes nosy. "How's the menu tasting going? Have you picked the centerpieces yet?" I gave the same answer. "Planning is on hold." They accepted it politely. What else could they do? Few people want to look directly at a crumbling foundation. It makes them question their own walls. Meanwhile, Daniel and his family seemed determined to maintain their own version of the play. Evelyn hosted luncheons, smiling over porcelain plates, telling her friends that stress had gotten to the young couple. Daniel posted photographs of himself at charity events, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder, in older pictures, the captions suggesting harmony. I was written out of the script, but still used as set decoration. Then came the email. One evening I opened my inbox and saw her name, Evelyn. The subject line read, "Clarification." Inside was no kindness, only venom arranged in neat paragraphs. "You should be grateful," she wrote. "Our family gave you a platform you could never have built on your own. Without us, you are nothing more than a gold digger desperate to cling to someone above your station. Do not embarrass us further. Stay quiet, stay small." I stared at the words for a long time, the cursor blinking at the bottom of the screen like a metronome marking out my heartbeat. There was no mistake here. She meant every syllable. I did not reply. Instead, I created another folder, this one digital, and saved the email inside. Evidence has a way of growing more valuable with time, and I knew better than to discard it. Days turned into weeks. I went to work, managed my projects, smiled at colleagues who had no idea that my personal life had been scorched. At night, I returned to the apartment and the hollow space of what should have been a home. But silence can be sharpened into a blade. I understood that now. Every step I took was deliberate, every plan measured. I had already erased the wedding from existence. What remained was the illusion Daniel and Evelyn clung to the story they told themselves and others. They believed I was merely paused, waiting for permission to continue. They had no idea that my silence was not surrender. It was preparation. I will tell you later what I did with that email, how it left their perfect masks cracked and slipping. For now, know this: sometimes the cruelest words are not spoken aloud at a party. Sometimes they are typed in black letters, preserved forever, in a digital vault. It was exactly 4 weeks after that party when my phone lit up with his name. I let it ring. A voicemail followed his voice, calm, almost cheerful. Then came the text, "I'm ready to talk, I've missed you. Let's resume planning." The confidence in those words stunned me, as though I had been on pause waiting for him to press play. I called him back, and when he answered, his tone was light breezy, like someone who had taken a long weekend and was now refreshed. "I was so happy to see your name pop up," he said. "Look, I was a mess, totally stressed. I just needed a break. I'm better now, and I'm ready to jump back in. We need to schedule the menu tasting. My mother is breathing down my neck." I waited a moment before answering. "There is no tasting to schedule." A beat of silence. "What do you mean?" The contract with the caterer was terminated, just like the contract with the hotel, and the photographer, and the florist, Everything is gone, Daniel. The silence on his end thickened like a storm gathering. You canceled the Grand Mayfair without even telling me. His voice rose. Do you realize that was a $15,000 deposit? My mother's friends are all expecting October 12th. Call them back. Call Beatrice right now and fix it. I can't, I said evenly. You told me you needed space, no contact. A wedding requires commitment, not suspension. You pulled out, so I dissolved it. The panic in his tone was raw. You don't understand. That date is on every calendar. My father's business partners are invited. Do you know what kind of embarrassment this causes me? Embarrassment, I repeated softly, is telling a ballroom full of people that I am nothing without your family's money. His breathing grew sharp through the line. That was a joke. You're being dramatic. I almost laughed then. Dramatic. The word tasted bitter. He who staged life like a performance accused me of theatrics when I simply removed the stage. The call ended with him shouting, demanding I undo what was already undone. I hung up without raising my voice once. Not long after Evelyn's messages began arriving, first angry, then pleading, then threatening. She spoke of reputation, of legacy, of how I had humiliated their family by acting without permission. To her, money and status were the only language. But she didn't realize that contracts spoke louder, and mine had already spoken. That was the moment I knew the balance had shifted, for once they were scrambling and I was silent. And silence when chosen can be deafening. When humiliation festers behind closed doors, it poisons the air. But when it steps into the sunlight, it burns everything it touches. Evelyn gave me that fire herself. One evening, as I sorted through the debris of canceled plans, another message arrived in my inbox. It was from her, dripping with arrogance. She wrote that I was a parasite who should be grateful to have been tolerated this long, that I had set fire to a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. She signed it with her full name, as though stamping her authority into the insult. I read it twice. Then I opened Twitter, or X as people call it now. I uploaded a screenshot of her words, no commentary, no added venom, just the email itself with a single caption. This is what happens when you say no to money's leash. Within minutes, it spread. Within hours, it caught fire. The hashtag number break the contract began to climb. By morning, it was everywhere. Thousands of strangers, then tens of thousands, were dissecting every line Evelyn had written. Some mocked her phrasing. Others shared their own stories of wealthy families treating them like accessories. The post reached 1 million views in less than a day. I woke up to find my name trending. Reporters called influencers, demanded interviews, friends texted in disbelief. Evelyn's polished image, once untouchable, was now under siege. Screenshots of her attending charity galas were paired with her email, calling me a gold digger. People questioned the sincerity of every smile she had ever given in front of a camera. Daniel tried to control the damage. He released a statement about miscommunication and family stress, but the internet is not kind to half-hearted apologies. His words were shredded, turned into memes, mocked by voices louder than his. Meanwhile, invitations to his father's business events began to shrink. Partners pulled out of deals quietly. The same friends who had clapped their glasses at our engagement stopped answering calls. In less than a week, the family's social fortress had cracks running through every wall. I stayed quiet. I didn't need to defend myself. Their own words had done the work for me. But what no one knew was that the email was only part of the story. I had something else tucked safely away, something heavier than gossip, something made of stone and memory. It was still locked inside a bank vault, small enough to sit in my hand, old enough to carry 3 generations. That would come later. For now, I simply watched the fire spread, warming my hands at the blaze Evelyn herself had sparked. The fire burned for weeks. Articles came and went, podcasts dissected every angle, but the story refused to fade. Every time Evelyn or Daniel tried to put a lid on it, another screenshot or old video surfaced. Someone even found footage of that engagement party, Daniel, smirking into the microphone, my face frozen beside him. The clip looped endlessly, paired with the hashtag number break the contract. Still, they clung to the fantasy that this could be salvaged. That is how I found myself invited, summoned really to a meeting at their estate. To settle matters, Evelyn wrote. I knew better. They wanted control back. I went anyway, not out of duty, but out of choice. And I carried something with me, a small brass key, cool in my palm, tied to a box. No one in that room had touched. The estate was as ostentatious as ever, columns too white to be real, chandeliers too bright to look at for long. They had gathered in the drawing room Daniel in a tailored suit Evelyn, with her diamonds and his father glowering in silence. They wanted me to crawl back to agree to some sanitized version of the truth. Evelyn began with a smile that could cut glass. We can put this behind us, dear. Delete your posts, release a statement of reconciliation, and we'll move forward as if nothing happened. Daniel leaned forward. We'll reschedule the wedding, smaller, private. The damage can still be repaired. I let their words hang in the air, then placed the brass key on the polished mahogany table. The clink echoed louder than any of their speeches. This, I said, opens the safe deposit box where my grandmother's diamond ring now rests. It is mine. It has always been mine, and it will never pass through your hands. The room shifted. Evelyn's smile cracked first. Daniel's face flushed deep red. His father stood fists clenching, but I didn't flinch. You thought money made you gatekeepers of dignity, I continued. You thought I was an accessory, something to arrange beside the wine and the chandeliers. But you were mistaken. The contracts are dissolved. The ring is secured, and the world has already seen who you are. Evelyn slammed her glass onto the table, shattering it across the polished wood. A guest, yes, they had brought witnesses, perhaps to intimidate me, caught the scene on their phone. By the next morning, the clip of Evelyn screaming, her voice breaking as she hurled accusations at me, was everywhere. TikTok had its field day. Memes sprouted like weeds, her contorted face, beside captions about Class Daniel's bewildered expression, underlined with his own words about nothing without money. For me, there was no triumph in shouting, only in standing still, letting their empire collapse under the weight of its own arrogance. I left the estate that night without raising my voice once. The brass key was back in my pocket, steady as a heartbeat. News moves quickly in this age, but scandal moves faster. Within days of that meeting at the estate, the video of Evelyn's outburst had eclipsed everything else. She had wanted to appear regal, above reproach. Instead, the world saw a woman unhinged, shrieking, while diamonds rattled against her neck. Daniel fared no better. He tried to hold interviews to project calm, but every clip was paired online with his smirk from the engagement party. You're nothing without my family's money. It had become a slogan, twisted and mocked, printed on t-shirts and mugs. Imagine that a man's arrogance turned into novelty merchandise. The fallout struck deeper than public ridicule. Daniel's father's company, an empire built on real estate and polished reputation, began to bleed clients. 2 major contracts were pulled within a week. A bank announced it was reviewing their partnership. Associates who once filled their dinner tables stopped calling. In private, I heard whispers that even longtime allies were reconsidering their investments. I didn't have to lift a finger. Their undoing was self-inflicted, magnified by the lens of a society that devours hypocrisy. Meanwhile, my life, quiet, ordinary on the surface, shifted in unexpected ways. Messages poured in from strangers, some angry, many supportive. Women wrote to me about their own stories, about families who belittled them, about partners who dangled money like chains. A movement small but loud began to gather under the hashtag. Then came an invitation, a financial conference themed around women in leadership. They asked me not just to attend, but to speak. I hesitated. Public speaking had never been my aim, but something inside me stirred. Why not? If my private humiliation had already gone public, perhaps it could serve a purpose greater than revenge. When I stood on that stage, lights warm against my face, I did not talk about Daniel or Evelyn by name. I spoke instead about contracts, not of weddings, but of dignity. About how silence can be armor, how preparation can be strength. The audience rose to their feet. For once, applause didn't sound hollow. But in the midst of that newfound support, I carried one last thread. A conversation left unfinished, a door not yet closed. Daniel still called, still texted, still demanded an audience. He wanted an ending on his terms. And so I agreed to meet him one final time. We met in a glass-walled conference room downtown, the kind designed to impress clients with skyline views. Daniel was already there when I arrived, pacing in his navy suit, jaw tight. He had lost weight, his posture sagged beneath the fabric. When he saw me, he tried to summon that old charm, but it flickered like a dying bulb. "Thank you for coming," he began, voice strained. All of this, it's gotten out of control. We can fix it. If you just delete the posts, if you make a statement saying you misunderstood, people will forgive. They always forgive." I sat across from him, placing my hands calmly on the table. Forgiveness is not merchandise, Daniel. You cannot buy it and you cannot sell it. His eyes darkened. You don't understand what's at stake. My family's name, our legacy, it's being dragged through the mud. Your family dragged themselves, I replied. They pulled me into the mud first, and the world simply watched them slip. He leaned forward, desperate now. We can still get married. We can start fresh. Smaller ceremony, no cameras, no spectacle. Just us. That was when I let the silence linger long enough for him to squirm. Then I said the words I had carried like a stone in my chest. You treated me like an accessory, but I became the headline instead. His mouth opened closed. No rebuttal came. He had always thrived on dominance, on controlling the stage. Without the stage, he was only a man with empty hands. I stood smoothing the fabric of my coat. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass, indifferent, eternal. This is the last time we speak, I told him. Your story is yours to salvage or to bury. Mine is already written. And then I walked away, down the elevator, through the lobby, out into the cold evening air. Each step felt lighter, as though I had been carrying a weight I didn't recognize until it was gone. There are moments in life when revenge does not look like fire or fury. Sometimes it looks like stillness, like leaving the room without raising your voice, knowing the echo of your absence will be louder than any argument. So here is where the story ends. Not with a wedding, not with applause in a ballroom, but with clarity. Family names may crumble, fortunes may falter, but dignity once reclaimed can steady a life. If you think Sophia made the right move, comment right. If you have a better idea for revenge, share it below. I am reading them all.